Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take those universal truths, the pieces of advice that feel insightful but also maybe impossibly daunting, and we turn them into something practical, an actual plan backed by research.
Exactly.
Today, we are diving deep into a phrase that, well, it often gets a strong reaction. Could be immediate empowerment, could be profound discomfort. And that phrase is, you teach people how to treat you. Now, for many of us hearing this, it can feel like a heavy accusation, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Like it suggests any mistreatment we've experienced is somehow, our fault. A curriculum we didn't even know we were writing.
And that feeling of blame, that's exactly what we need to kind of wrestle with today. We've pulled together quite a stack of sources exploring the psychological roots here.
Right.
We're talking Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory, how behavioral modeling works, but also academic research on things like emotional abuse, resilience, and the real power of self-compassion.
So our mission for this deep dive, it's really crucial. We are trying to move past that toxic potential for victim blame.
Absolutely.
We want to extract the science, yes, but also the clear, practical steps you can use. How to take this statement and make it a toolkit for self-respect. We need to understand the mechanism. How do our actions, or maybe even our inactions, signal our worth to the world around us?
So the core question we really have to answer for you is this. How do we shift? How do we go from feeling judged, maybe victimized by this idea, to seeing it as a framework, a powerful one, for defining, upholding, and, importantly, consistently enforcing healthy boundaries?
Yeah, figuring out how to stop just tolerating stuff that drains us and start actually commanding the respect we deserve. Not through fighting necessarily, but just through consistent self-regard.
That's the goal. Okay, so let's just start right there, validating that discomfort you might be feeling. When people hear you teach people how to treat you, the immediate reaction, especially if you've experienced trauma or, systemic disrespect, it's often anger.
And understandably so.
Rightfully so. Because taken literally, that phrase is, well, it's grossly oversimplified. And in serious context, it just sounds like victim blaming, plain and simple.
Yeah, you see this come up all the time in discussions.
Yeah.
People immediately point to scenarios where they clearly had, zero control.
Exactly.
Think about abusive parents. A child literally cannot escape that situation. Or structural issues like racism or sexism at work. Your behavior often has very little bearing on someone else's prejudice.
Or even just predatory behavior online. Someone gets an unwanted, inappropriate message on a dating app. Did they teach that person to send it? Of course not.
It's absurd in those contexts.
Right. In situations with a huge power imbalance or where the behavior stems from actual malice, prejudice, or frankly, criminal action, the idea the victim taught the aggressor. It's not just irrelevant, it's deeply damaging.
We're talking basic human decency here. Lawful conduct.
The responsibility for appropriate behavior falls squarely on the person doing the action, period. A victim of a crime doesn't teach the perpetrator anything other than maybe where they were at the wrong time. The perpetrator chooses that behavior.
Okay, so if the phrase completely falls apart with structural issues or malice, where does it actually gain its traction? Why do people find it empowering?
This is where we have to make that critical distinction. It's about control versus responsibility. That's the pivot point.
Explain that.
So the empowered interpretation, the one that actually aligns with psychological theory, it focuses entirely on responsibility. We can't control what an inherently malicious or prejudiced person decides to do. We just can't.
Right.
But we hold complete responsibility for our choices. Choices about who gets access to us, how we respond when our standards are violated, and how we enforce our personal boundaries.
Okay, that distinction feels subtle, but it's actually huge, isn't it?
It changes everything.
Like, if I try to control an abusive coworker by, teaching them basic ethics.
You'll fail.
Yeah.
And you'll burn yourself out trying.
Right. But if I shift my focus, take responsibility for protecting my own peace, then I'm thinking about what I will tolerate and what consequences I will impose on my life if they cross that line.
Exactly. So when empowerment advocates use this phrase, what they're really getting at is this. Others learn what we accept, what we tolerate, based on the level of self-respect we display.
We're modeling.
We're modeling, not just for others, but for ourselves, too. The second we consistently let boundary violations slide, we're implicitly signaling, my needs, they're negotiable.
So it totally transforms the goal. It's not about trying to train someone else to be a decent human being.
Which, let's be honest, is often a fruitless task.
Yeah. It's more about simply determining Are they capable of being in my life,
Yeah.
given how they currently operate?
Precisely. The new mantra, the self-respecting one, becomes something like, look, there's no training program here. Either you have the basic capacity for respect, or I will gradually, consistently, and importantly, without unnecessary drama, reduce your access to me. And making this shift towards agency, it's vital, because the cost of not setting and enforcing these standards, it's a heavy psychological burden. Often, it leads to what psychologists call learned helplessness.
Right, let's dive into that. Emotional abuse, which is really pervasive, often hidden, involves control, humiliation, coercion. That kind of abuse inflicts serious psychological trauma. And when it's consistent, the person experiencing it often develops learned helplessness, or LH.
Learned helplessness. It's a state where someone feels just profoundly hopeless, depressed. They feel they have no control over their situation.
They've tried to escape, maybe?
Yeah.
Or change things?
Yeah, they've tried, they've failed repeatedly, and eventually they just stop trying. They generalize that failure, start believing their actions won't make a difference in any tough situation.
The sources we looked at highlighted this shift, didn't they?
Yeah.
From being escape-focused, actively looking for a way out,
to becoming survival-focused. Their whole internal narrative changes. They might start thinking, maybe I deserve this, or I'll never find anything better, or I just don't have what it takes to leave.
It's devastating.
It really is, and the research confirms it. Studies consistently find a significant positive link between experiencing emotional abuse and having high levels of learned helplessness. This impacts people currently in relationships, but also single people struggling with past trauma.
And the really insidious part of emotional abuse is that it kind of relies on creating that LH to keep the cycle going.
Right, absolutely. If the victim believes resistance is futile, the abuser maintains control. It's a vicious cycle.
Which is exactly why we need this deep dive. We need to give you the psychological toolkit, but also the practical steps to dismantle that feeling of futility.
To restore that sense of agency.
Yeah, and give you tangible ways to prove to yourself, and then, by extension to others, that resistance isn't just possible, it's entirely within your power. We're aiming to replace that passive survival focus with an active, empowered mindset.
Okay, so to really grasp how our actions teach others, we absolutely have to look at the work of Albert Bandura. He's, well, a giant in psychology.
Like hugely influential.
Yeah, because he managed to bridge that gap between pure behaviorism, the idea that we just react to things, and cognitive psychology, which emphasizes that our thoughts, our internal states, actually matter.
He provides the scientific framework that shows influence isn't just about what we say, it's about what we model consistently.
And his most famous concept demonstrating this is observational learning, which he validated back in 1961 with that iconic Bobo doll experiment.
Ah, yes, the Bobo doll, for anyone who needs a refresher.
Basically, kids watched an adult model being aggressive towards this inflatable doll, yelling at it, hitting it.
Right.
Then, when the kids were left alone with the doll, what happened? They imitated the specific aggressive behaviors they'd just seen.
And the key takeaway was that they learned this just by watching. They didn't need a direct reward or punishment themselves.
Exactly. Pure observational learning. Now let's apply that to adult relationships. If you grow up watching a parent constantly give in to an aggressive relative, you learn that strategy.
Or at work, if a colleague sees you just silently put up with being interrupted all the time.
They learn interrupting you has zero negative consequences. Your inaction becomes the model they learn from.
That's such a critical point from the sources. Letting disrespect slide isn't just about avoiding conflict in the moment. You are actively modeling tolerance for that behavior.
You're signaling, hey, that hurtful thing you just did, it didn't really have any consequences for you, and the emotional cost to me, apparently it's acceptable. You're unintentionally writing the lesson plan for your own mistreatment.
And when others see that lack of consequence, they just assume the behavior is okay.
They might not even be intentionally malicious. Often people just follow the path of least resistance. Your silence, your tendency to forgive too easily, your willingness to absorb their bad mood, that becomes the blueprint for how they'll keep interacting with you.
Okay, I think this is where we need to get a bit more specific, technically speaking. Because Bandura didn't just stop at observational learning, did he? He developed this whole framework. Social cognitive theory.
He did, and central to that is the concept of reciprocal determinism.
Sounds complicated.
It sounds it, but the idea itself is incredibly empowering. Bandura saw humans as self-organizing, proactive, self-reflecting, and self-regulating. We aren't just puppets controlled by external forces. We're active agents shaping our own lives.
Okay.
And this process is governed by what he called triadic reciprocal causation. Basically, he said our lives are shaped by the constant mutual influence of three factors playing off each other.
A triangle of influence.
Kind of. The 3 points are human behavior, what we actually do, environmental factors, the situations we're in, the people around us, and personal factors.
Personal factors mean?
Our internal world, our thoughts, beliefs, emotions, self-worth, even biological stuff. Cognitive, affective, and biological events.
Okay, this is crucial. Let's slow down and use an example maybe. That difficult relative who always criticizes your career choices.
Perfect example. Let's unpack that with the triadic model.
Right.
Initially, the environmental factor, the critical relative, triggers a negative personal factor in you. Maybe your sense of self-worth plummets or you feel instant anxiety. That negative internal state then influences your behavior. You might withdraw, maybe give the silent treatment, or you might try to weakly defend yourself.
Which usually just adds fuel to the fire.
Exactly. That's the cycle, often driven by learned helplessness, just playing out. Environment triggers internal state, triggers ineffective behavior.
But the reciprocal part, that's the key, right? That's the intervention point.
That's the intervention point. You can't directly control the relative of the environment, but you can work on your personal factor, your internal beliefs, your self-talk.
So maybe I focus on building my self-efficacy. We'll get to that. I decide, okay, their opinion is uncomfortable, but it doesn't actually define my worth.
Right. That internal shift in your personal factor allows you to choose a different behavior. Instead of getting defensive, maybe you calmly but firmly say, I understand you have concerns, but my career isn't up for discussion. If you bring it up again, I'm going to have to end this conversation.
Okay, and here's the reciprocal magic then. My changed behavior feeds back and tries to reshape the environmental factor.
Precisely. The relative is now faced with consistent, predictable, calm enforcement of a boundary. They're getting new observational data they learn. Criticizing my career leads to losing access to conversation with me.
So by changing my internal narrative, my personal factor, and my response, my behavior, I actively shift the social dynamic, the environmental factor.
You stop just reacting to the world and start setting the tone for interactions within it. This is basically Bandura giving a scientific thumbs up to the idea that you teach people how to treat you. Not by demanding, but by modeling and consistently enforcing your own standards.
Okay, so Bandura gives us the external blueprint, how our actions model things for others. But we need the internal engine, right, the power source, to actually make those changes stick.
Absolutely. And that engine seems to be fueled by two key psychological concepts, self-efficacy and self-compassion.
Let's start with self-efficacy, Bandura's concept again.
Right. As Bandura defined it, self-efficacy isn't just general self-confidence, it's more specific. It's the belief in your ability to succeed at a particular task or alleviate a specific problem.
So in our context, it's not just feeling good about myself overall, it's believing, yes, I can actually say no to that demanding friend and handle the awkwardness that follows.
Exactly. Or I can successfully enforce this boundary about not being yelled at. It's task-specific belief in your capability.
And why is that so important for behavior change?
Because self-efficacy beliefs act as mediators. Think about school. If a student has high self-efficacy in math, they'll likely set higher goals and put in more effort. If you have low self-efficacy about setting boundaries, maybe because past attempts failed or that learned helplessness has set in,
You won't even try.
Yeah.
Or you'll give up at the first sign of pushback.
Precisely. So building it is key. How do we do that? The research is pretty clear. The most powerful way is through what Bandura called successful mastery experiences.
Meaning you actually have to do the hard thing and succeed at it.
Yes, which means the practical advice here is to start small. Scaffold the difficulty.
Okay.
Don't start by trying to set a massive boundary with the most emotionally challenging person in your life.
Yeah.
That's setting yourself up for failure, which tanks your self-efficacy.
Right. So start small.
Like saying no or a low-stakes request. An optional evening thing you don't really want to do. Or practice immediately leaving a conversation if someone you barely know starts getting nasty.
And each small success.
Each small success provides positive reinforcement. It proves to your internal system, your personal factor, hey, I can do this. It builds that belief step by step. This is how we systematically dismantle learned helplessness and build up self-efficacy for boundary setting.
Okay, that makes sense. Build belief through small wins. Now let's talk about the other internal lever, self-compassion, SC.
Huh.
You mentioned it's like the antidote to learned helplessness.
It really is. We established that LH makes people feel trapped, guilty, hopeless. Self-compassion offers a way out of that internal state.
How would you define it?
It's essentially treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and care that you would naturally offer to a good friend who's struggling.
So, less harsh self-judgment.
Way less. It involves being open to your own suffering, accepting failures or setbacks as part of being human, not as proof of your inadequacy. It's recognizing that discomfort, getting hurt, dealing with boundary violations, these are universal experiences.
People often mix up self-compassion with self-esteem. What's the crucial difference, especially when it comes to setting boundaries?
That's a great question. Traditional self-esteem is often contingent. It depends on external validation or performance.
Like, I feel good about myself if I get the promotion, or if people like me, or if my boundaries respected immediately.
Exactly. And that makes contingent self-esteem quite brittle. It fluctuates wildly depending on what's happening outside of you. It's very vulnerable to criticism or pushback.
So if I try to set a boundary and my self-esteem is tied to being liked and the person gets angry,
your self-esteem plummets and you're much more likely to retract the boundary to restore that feeling of being liked or approved of.
okay. And self-compassion.
Self-compassion is different. It's stable. It's based on an unconditional acceptance of your inherent worth, regardless of the outcome. So if you set a boundary with self-compassion and the other person pushes back,
It still feels bad, presumably.
oh yeah, it's still uncomfortable. But self-compassion allows you to acknowledge the difficulty, maybe the failure of the enforcement in that specific moment without it reflecting on your fundamental worth as a person. You can say, okay, that didn't go well, that felt awful, and I still deserve respect and I can try again. Your worth isn't on the line.
So you can hold firm even when it's tough.
Exactly. And the research really supports this. Studies show a significant negative relationship between learned helplessness and self-compassion. When LH goes up, SC tends to be low, and vice versa.
So boosting self-compassion directly combats that feeling of helplessness.
It does. And here's a really interesting finding. Individuals who practiced self-compassion showed more positive behaviors in their relationships, less dominating, more loving towards partners. And SC was actually a better predictor of constructive relationship behavior than general self-esteem was. Practicing self-compassion basically means you're giving yourself the validation and empathy that maybe the disrespectful person is withholding. It meets that internal need first, which is the prerequisite for having the strength to set external boundaries.
Okay, so we've got the science down. Bandura shows us people learn from our modeling. We know we need that internal foundation self-efficacy built through small wins and stable self-compassion. Now let's get super practical, the toolkit. How do we actually do it? How do we set and enforce boundaries to teach people how we expect to be treated?
First, we absolutely have to nail the definition of a boundary because it gets misunderstood all the time.
Right. It's not just telling someone what to do.
No. A psychological boundary is fundamentally a rule that governs your own behavior, the behavior of the person setting the rule. It's an internal understanding. This is where I end, and this is where you begin.
And the crucial distinction here, the one takeaway, if people remember nothing else,
is that a boundary is not a request. It's not an ultimatum that depends on the other person agreeing or cooperating.
It's about changing your response.
Exactly. You establish it by changing your own behavior. Let's make that concrete. A request or ultimatum sounds like, you must stop interrupting me. That needs their buy-in.
Okay.
A boundary sounds like, the next time you interrupt me while I'm speaking, I will pause the conversation until you acknowledge it, or maybe I will simply excuse myself from the discussion. See the difference?
Yeah, the second one only requires action from me. I don't need their permission to pause or leave.
Precisely. And that makes it immediately actionable. You don't need anyone else's cooperation to decide how you will conduct yourself. Okay, so based on the sources, we pulled out 3 key actions that form the pillars of teaching respect through boundaries.
All right, let's hear them. Action number 1.
Action 1, respond, don't react.
Okay, respond, don't react. What does that look like?
This applies directly in those moments of conflict, or when someone's being rude or aggressive. A reaction is impulsive. It's driven by their emotion. Someone storms in, yells, slams a door. Reacting is yelling back, getting defensive, letting your mood instantly tank.
Which basically hands them the controls to your emotional state.
Totally. A response, on the other hand, is deliberate. It's calm. It reinforces your standard for how you'll engage. You're signaling, nope, you don't get to dictate my emotional temperature.
How do you actually say that, though, in the moment?
The language is key, and it might take practice. If someone's yelling, you could try calmly saying something like, I can hear that you're really frustrated right now, but I don't participate in conversations when people are yelling. It feels disrespectful to me.
And then,
You state your action, your boundary. I'm going to step out of the room for about 10 minutes to give us both space. If you'd like to talk about this calmly afterwards, I'm willing to do that.
so the action itself, leaving the room, maybe ending the phone call, or even just pausing the conversation, that's the boundary enforcement.
Yes. You are role modeling acceptable interaction, just like Bandura showed. You're teaching. Rudeness or aggression equals you lose access to me, temporarily or permanently. It stops the escalation and prevents you from getting sucked into their emotional vortex.
It's like dealing with a tantrum, in a way.
It kind of is. You don't engage with the tantrum itself. You wait for the person to return to a state where rational conversation is possible. You teach them that emotional volatility isn't an effective strategy to get what they want from you.
Okay, that's action 1. Respond, don't react. What's next?
Action 2. Enforce boundaries. The power of no.
Ah, the big one. Saying no.
Fundamental. If you're stuck in that yes person pattern, you are constantly, consistently teaching people that your time, your energy, your resources, they're basically unlimited and always secondary to whatever they need.
You teach them they can ask for anything because you'll probably agree, even if it means sacrificing your own well-being.
Exactly. Now, the real challenge here often isn't just uttering the word no, it's handling the pushback that often follows.
Right. People who are used to getting their way, they have tactics, charm, maybe playing dumb, flattery.
Or the classic guilt. Oh, but I really need you. It just won't be the same without you. You're the only one who could possibly help.
Yeah. And this is where your self-efficacy gets tested, right? This is the moment of truth.
Absolutely. Because if you say no and they hit you with that guilt trip and you immediately fold, what lesson did you just teach them?
That my no doesn't really mean no. That if they just apply enough emotional pressure or persistence, they can override my boundary.
Precisely. You've just reinforced the exact behavior you wanted to start. So the empowered response has to be firm. It should be simple. And crucially, it requires zero elaborate justification.
So when the guilt trip starts,
You can use a simple boundary reinforcing phrase, something like, I understand this puts you in a difficult position, but my answer is still no. My capacity is 0 right now. Or even just, that doesn't work for me and I won't be discussing it further.
firm, simple, non-negotiable.
A firm no, enforced consistently, ideally with some calm distance if needed, is the clearest lesson you can offer. You're teaching them your self-respect is non-negotiable. And remember, you don't owe anyone a long essay explaining why it's a no. No is a complete sentence.
Okay. Action 1. Respond, don't react. Action 2. Enforce boundaries with no. What's the third pillar?
Action 3, communicate your feelings.
This feels important because so often people just avoid the conflict altogether.
Right, they default to the silent treatment, maybe passive-aggressive jabs, or they just laugh off comments that genuinely sting because confrontation feels too hard.
But that silence, as we learned from Bandura, signals acceptance.
It does. So we need to actively communicate the impact of someone's actions on us. The key is using clear, non-aggressive language. And the gold standard here is the I statement.
Not you did this, but when X happened, I felt Y.
Exactly. The point isn't to accuse or attack them, you're so insensitive. It's to educate them about the consequences of their behavior on your internal state.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of, you always pick on my job, you're so mean, which is accusatory and likely to make them defensive.
Right.
Try, hey, when you make comments like that about my career choices, it actually makes me feel kind of worthless and it really undermines my confidence. I need that to stop.
Okay. Clear, direct. Focuses on your feeling and the specific behavior.
And this communication serves two really important functions. First, sometimes people genuinely are oblivious, as some sources suggested. Maybe they learned that communication style somewhere else and don't realize it's hurtful. Giving clear feedback offers them a chance to adjust their behavior without it being punitive.
It gives them the benefit of the doubt
Initially. But second, if they aren't oblivious, if you communicate clearly how their actions make you feel, and they continue the behavior anyway,
then you know it's not ignorance, it's disrespect.
Exactly. And at that point, the communication phase is over. You move straight back to enforcement action 2, setting firm boundaries, creating distance if necessary.
Okay, those are the 3 actions. Respond, don't react. Enforce with no. Communicate feelings. Now, how do we tie it all together? What makes it actually work long term?
The absolutely essential ingredient, the one that makes or breaks the entire process, consistency.
If self-efficacy is the engine, consistency is the fuel.
Beautifully put. Consistency provides the stability, the predictability that's needed to reinforce any kind of behavioral change, both in you, building that self-efficacy, and in how others learn to approach you.
And inconsistency.
Inconsistency is the boundary killer. If you sometimes enforce it, but sometimes let things slide when you're tired or feeling guilty, or they catch you off guard, you teach people to gamble.
They'll just keep pushing, hoping to hit the jackpot the moment when you give in.
Exactly. They'll hold out for the version of you that benefits them the most, the flexible you, the guilty you. Which means your boundary becomes effectively meaningless because they know it's porous. They just have to find the right time or apply the right pressure.
So consistency rooted in that self-compassion we talked about means upholding your standards regardless of who it is.
Yes. Whether it's your boss, your partner, a friend, that difficult relative. It doesn't mean being rigid or inflexible about everything in life, but it means being reliable and predictable when it comes to valuing your own needs and limits.
And that steadiness, that reliability.
It builds trust and credibility. People start to listen more carefully, approach you more thoughtfully, because you've shown through consistent action that your self-respect isn't just a mood you're in today. It's a fundamental principle.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life.
Yeah.
And that consistency elevates this whole process from just setting rules to genuine, sustainable empowerment. It promotes autonomy and self-regulation for everyone involved.
And maybe most importantly, every single time you consistently honor a boundary, you send a powerful message back to your own internal system, your personal factor.
Yeah. I matter. My feelings are valid. My time and energy are precious. Each act of consistent boundary enforcement rebuilds that self-efficacy, chipping away at any lingering learned helplessness. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. That provocative statement, you teach people how to treat you, fundamentally, it seems less like an accusation and more like an invitation to embrace personal agency.
Exactly. We move from blame to empowerment by shifting the focus to our responsibility, not trying to control others. And we saw how the science, particularly Bandura's work on observational learning and reciprocal causation, really backs this up.
We confirmed that doing the internal work, building stable self-compassion as the antidote to learned helplessness, is absolutely essential. It grounds your actions in self-worth, not just chasing external validation.
And then we laid out the practical toolkit. Responding calmly instead of reacting emotionally. Mastering the power of a consistent no to enforce your boundaries. And clearly communicating your feelings as a first step before needing to resort to distance.
And underpinning it all is that quiet power of consistency. Respect isn't something you have to beg for or demand aggressively. It's something you command, just by the dignified way you carry yourself and the standards you consistently uphold for yourself, unapologetically.
Your worth is inherent, it's established, and it doesn't need to be swayed by external pressures or someone else's bad mood. And remember, boundaries aren't meant to be walls that isolate you. Think of them more like guidelines, a clear map you offer the people in your life, showing them exactly how they can best love you, support you, and maintain a healthy, sustainable relationship with you.
That's a great way to put it.
The right people, the ones who genuinely care and respect you. They won't be threatened by your clarity. Honestly, they'll probably appreciate it because it removes the guesswork. They know where they stand and how to connect with you respectfully.
Yeah.
There's a saying, people tend to meet you where you meet yourself. So if you consistently find yourself feeling disrespected, overlooked, taken for granted, it might be worth considering gently that it's not always because everyone around you is malicious.
Sometimes, maybe.
Sometimes it might be because you haven't yet drawn a clear, consistent, and visible line indicating what's acceptable and what's not. So as you move forward from this conversation, maybe ask yourself this provocative question. What unspoken tolerance, what piece of my time, my energy, or my peace that I consistently let slide am I teaching the world is acceptable for them to take from me today?